Muscle plays a far more critical role in women's health than commonly appreciated, extending well beyond aesthetics or physical strength. The panelists emphasized that muscle is a vital metabolic organ influencing glucose metabolism, insulin sensitivity, and inflammatory processes. Unlike traditional views that pigeonhole muscle as merely a locomotive structure, muscle actually communicates with other organs such as the brain and bone, producing hormones like irisin that promote neurogenesis and metabolic regulation. For women, especially, muscle mass acts as a protective factor against age-related diseases, including osteoporosis, frailty, and cognitive decline. The importance of building and maintaining muscle becomes even more pronounced for women dealing with inflammatory disorders such as PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, and endometriosis, where muscle mass can mitigate insulin resistance and chronic inflammation. Given estrogen's anti-inflammatory and muscle-supporting properties, the age period from 35 to 45, termed the critical decade, is crucial for women to maximize muscle synthesis. Although muscle loss can be somewhat reversed later in life, it is far more efficient and beneficial to establish a solid muscle foundation early while estrogen levels are still robust. When asked if women should exercise differently throughout their menstrual cycle, the experts counseled moderation and self-awareness over rigid prescriptive approaches. While hormonal fluctuations during various cycle phases cause metabolic and temperature changes, many women either do not ovulate regularly or lack precise awareness of their cycle's exact phases. This variability makes a one-size-fits-all exercise regimen based on menstrual timing impractical and potentially counterproductive. The guidance shared suggested that resistance training and building muscle should remain a foundational practice regardless of cycle stage, pregnancy, or fertility treatment. Adjustments such as reducing intensity or modifying movements can be made on days when energy dips or menstrual pain occurs. For instance, higher intensity or heavier lifting might feel best 5 to 7 days before ovulation, when estrogen peaks and energy is typically elevated. However, flexibility and listening to the body's signals trump strict adherence to cycle-based programming. This approach encourages consistency without overcomplication or discouragement when cycle irregularities arise. The discussion illuminated a frequent mistake among midlife women, gravitating toward moderate, constant intensity training that neither sufficiently challenges the body nor allows for adequate recovery. Such middle ground exertion fails to stimulate the post-exercise anti-inflammatory responses essential for muscle and bone adaptation, often leading to injury and stagnation. In contrast, the experts advocated for a polarized model of training that alternates between truly high-intensity efforts, such as sprint interval training or heavy lifting, and low-intensity recovery activities like walking or gentle cycling. For premenopausal women, a mix of heavy resistance training, plyometrics, and conditioning is well tolerated due to estrogen's protective effects. However, as estrogen declines in perimenopause and menopause, volume and intensity must be carefully balanced to avoid exacerbating inflammation and impairing recovery. Adequate rest days and mobility work are non-negotiable to prevent injury and support longevity. This nuanced view moves away from the notion that more is better, emphasizing instead strategic, quality training tailored to hormonal and life stage realities. One of the more compelling truths revealed was the futility of relying solely on exercise to outwork dietary excesses, particularly when people equate weight loss simply with calorie burn. Running a mile only burns about 100 calories, less than the caloric content of a few cookies, underscoring why exercise alone is insufficient for sustainable weight management. The experts championed the concept of recomposition, the strategic gain of muscle and loss of fat, as the healthier and more achievable goal than mere weight loss. Strength training, paired with adequate nutrition, especially sufficient protein intake, is critical for effective recomposition. Medications like GLP-1 receptor agonists were acknowledged as powerful tools for certain populations struggling with metabolic dysfunction and obesity, but with strong caveats. Without concurrent resistance training and nutritional oversight, such drugs may accelerate muscle and bone loss, potentially undermining long-term health. The emphasis was clear. Tools like medication are adjuncts, not replacements, for lifestyle intervention. Weight loss framed purely as a matter of willpower was identified as a damaging myth that ignores sociocultural, hormonal, and metabolic complexities. The conversation revealed a shift from initial enthusiasm about intermittent and prolonged fasting toward a more cautious stance for women, especially in midlife. While fasting can induce beneficial adaptive stress and autophagy in men, women's more complex hormonal architecture makes them susceptible to adverse effects from prolonged nutrient deprivation. Hormonal signaling through the hypothalamus is highly sensitive to nutrient availability, and extended fasts risk triggering survival mode responses that suppress reproductive hormones, increase inflammation, and promote visceral fat storage. Instead, time-restricted eating aligned with the circadian rhythm, eating during daylight hours and fasting overnight, was promoted as a practical and hormone-friendly strategy. Eating breakfast shortly after waking and avoiding food for at least 2 to 3 hours before bedtime supports metabolic health, sleep quality, and hormonal balance. The panelists highlighted that fasting should never compromise protein intake or total calories required to support muscle maintenance and recovery from exercise. Creatine's reputation as a supplement reserved for bodybuilders was decisively dispelled. Dr. Mary Claire Haver detailed how creatine functions as a key player in cellular energetics across multiple tissues, muscle, brain, heart, and gut, and is crucial for rapid energy turnover. Women naturally store about 70 to 80% of the creatine amounts men do, and many diets lack sufficient creatine due to reduced intake of animal proteins. Supplementation with 3 to 5 grams daily supports not only muscle strength and recovery, but also cognitive function, brain injury recovery, gut health, and fatigue mitigation. The health benefits of creatine extend to longevity and performance, with growing evidence supporting its role in improving mitochondrial efficiency and reducing cellular stress. Despite this, many women underestimate their strength potential and hesitate to lift heavy or use supplements like creatine. The experts urged women to be bold in their efforts to build strength and to incorporate creatine supplementation as part of a holistic strategy for aging well and maintaining metabolic resilience. Bone density and integrity emerged as a critical but often overlooked pillar of women's health. Women generally start with lower peak bone mass than men and experience accelerated bone loss after estrogen declines during perimenopause, increasing risks of osteoporosis and debilitating fractures, especially of the hip, which carries a high mortality rate. Strength training and impact activities, such as jumping, stimulate bone remodeling through mechanotransduction pathways, signaling osteocytes to deposit new bone. The experts highlighted studies like the Lift More trial, which debunked fears that osteoporotic women cannot safely lift heavy weights. Progressive resistance training under supervision not only prevents fractures but can increase bone density. The synergy between hormone replacement therapy and exercise was also emphasized, suggesting that combined interventions produce superior results compared to either alone. Early assessment of bone density, ideally before menopause, allows for timely intervention to optimize bone health outcomes. Nutrition was framed not just in terms of calories or weight, but as a complex modulation of inflammation, gut microbiome, and hormonal function. High fiber intake from diverse plant sources fosters a healthy gut microbiome that supports estrogen metabolism and reduces systemic inflammation, both vital for fertility and aging. Processed foods, ultra-processed chemicals, and endocrine disruptors were recognized as drivers of chronic inflammation that undermine women's hormonal and metabolic health. Protein intake topped the nutrition discussion, with RDA guidelines labeled as minimum survival doses inadequate for active or aging women. The panel advocated for significantly higher protein consumption, up to 1.6 grams per kilogram or more, to support muscle synthesis, reduce frailty, and improve recomposition even without exercise intervention. Animal sources were considered important for amino acid completeness, although plant proteins combined with fiber offer anti-inflammatory benefits. Overall, nutrition choices should contribute to an anti-inflammatory milieu supportive of both reproductive and general health. Environmental toxins, including endocrine disruptors, microplastics, and chemicals found in plastics, receipts, and cosmetics, were presented as pervasive factors compromising women's hormonal health, fertility, and aging trajectory. These toxins act insidiously, promoting inflammation, disrupting hormonal signaling, and even damaging ovarian function, which may contribute to premature or early menopause. While total avoidance is impossible, simple mitigation strategies such as reducing plastic use in kitchens, avoiding heating food in plastic, minimizing use of scented products, and declining thermal paper receipts collectively reduce toxin burden. The discussion stressed the cumulative effect of these exposures rather than isolated incidents, encouraging women to start with manageable changes rather than fatalistic avoidance. Intriguingly, dietary components like soy were noted to counteract toxin effects such as BPA, underscoring diet's role in mitigating environmental insults. Greater public education and systemic changes are necessary to address this hidden but significant health threat to women. Sleep was perhaps described as the cornerstone behavior underpinning all aspects of women's health: metabolic, hormonal, neurological, and psychological. Despite its importance, midlife women often suffer compromised sleep due to fluctuating estrogen levels, leading to night sweats, fragmented rest, and circadian rhythm disturbances. Poor sleep perpetuates inflammation, insulin resistance, impaired recovery from exercise, and cognitive decline, forming a vicious cycle that accelerates aging and disease risk. The experts recommended rigorous adherence to circadian-friendly sleep hygiene, including consistent bed and wake times, avoiding food 3 hours before bed, and minimizing alcohol. Low-dose melatonin and magnesium were accepted as useful adjuncts, but only when used thoughtfully to avoid dependency or circadian disruption. Sleep apnea, which is underdiagnosed in women due to subtler symptoms, was flagged as a critical comorbidity contributing to cardiovascular risk and dementia. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia was recommended as a frontline approach to breaking maladaptive sleep patterns. Beyond creatine, the panel discussed specific supplements tailored to different female life stages and health goals. For fertility, folic acid remains indispensable to prevent neural tube defects, while vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids, magnesium, and coenzyme Q10 support reproductive and mitochondrial health. Vitamin D deficiency was noted as widespread and linked to poorer outcomes in fertility and general health, meriting supplementation up to safe upper limits. For aging and longevity, supplements address inflammation, cellular senescence, and metabolic efficiency. Agents like fisetin and NAD+ precursors, such as NMN, were highlighted for their roles in combating age-associated cellular dysfunction. Collagen supplements, while popular for joint health, were discussed with nuance. Type 2 collagen may reduce joint pain but does not regenerate cartilage or substitute for protein needed for muscle building. Optimizing supplementation requires personalization and integration with lifestyle habits.